Okay, we've got a very interesting discussion lined up for all you folks. Do you or any of your loved ones need to relocate to India from the United States? It may not be out of choice, but the world has changed with COVID-19. It's an election year in the US. You're seeing changes in visa rules as well. So for all of you that want to do a ghar vapsi, want to come back to build in India, what is it that you need to keep in mind? What are the questions you need to ask yourselves? What gets easier? What gets tougher? I thought there's no one better to have this conversation with a partner at Lightspeed India Partners, Hemant. He actually had written a really interesting blog. So I reached out to him and asked him to come join me right here on the show. And with his help, we managed to get two other very successful stories and successful people who left America to come back to India to build in India. So joining me today is the head of Amazon Prime India, Shubho, as well as Ashwini, the founder and CEO at Matt Street Den. Thank you to all three of you for joining us and being a part of this interesting discussion on ET Now. Hemant, I'll come to you first because it was thanks to your blog that I even got the idea of having such a discussion on the channel. You left it all to come back to India. You have shown that you can do it. It is possible to be extremely successful while following your passion. When I read your blog, one of the most interesting things that spoke out to me, and I'll admit, I have a sister who's in San Francisco. One of the things that really stood out to me was one of the questions you said you must ask yourself. Where do I want to die? Why is that so important? For a guy or a girl who may be, or a lady who might be in her 20s or 30s to think about where I want to die. You can live in a whole host of countries and come back here to retire at home.
Thanks for having me here, Nayantara. Really pleasure to be here. The question sounds very morbid, but for me, it was an existential question at the time. I went to the US for my postgrad in 2003, and I almost immediately wanted to come back. I remember having discussions with my batchmates at the time that I want to sort of spend 2 years doing my master's and then head back. And then life just kept me back in the US. I tried 2 times to leave the US, once for a nonprofit, and then the second time was for my MBA in the UK. And both times I ended up coming back to the US for a variety of reasons. And this is my third and final try. And as I was reflecting on that journey, all those 2 tries, failed trials in the past, what I realized was happening in my head was that I wasn't really sure how to time my return back to India. Right? It was either now or never or somewhere in between. And I was pretty sure that now would be a very difficult, sort of thing to jump over the hump on, because it's never really, when you say now, it just means so many questions just come to your mind, right? And never was not an answer for me. I didn't want to stay in the US forever. So it was this, when should I come back? What are the decisions I need to make? Should I come back when I retire? Should I come back when I hit 40 or 50 or so on, a salary range or whatever, right? And then for me, those were the kind of conversations I was having in my own head, and they were not leading to a clarity in my own head, right? And then the question about where do you want to die was the first clarifying point that I kind of sort of thought about. I realized that, if it has to happen, it has to happen around one particular question, and that was, do I see myself dying in this country, in the US? And the answer to that was a clear no, absolutely no. And then from there, I want to walk backwards. Okay, assuming I'll die at 70, 75, 80, right? Do I want to wait till I hit 60 or 40? Do I want to sort of, so then that discussion became a lot more meatier, a lot more richer for me, and led me to realize that it is a question of my personal life, like what do I want to achieve in my personal life in the US, and what do I get by returning back to India? It was more about family at the time. And then the second was an economic question. If I hit this number in salary and bonus, is that enough for me? And when I hit both of those 2, criteria, I just said, okay, this is it. I will never be able to optimize any more than this. I'm getting the salary I want. I'm getting a job I want with a team that I really like. And I'm getting the personal side of my life, right? My girlfriend, now my wife, was in Bangalore based. My dad had passed away. My mom was living alone. My sister was in Bangalore. A lot of my extended family is also in Bangalore. So when all of those things added up for me, I said, this is it. Don't optimize any further. This is it. Jump the ship. And I jumped the ship.
Okay, so for you, it was it was something that you wanted to do right from the start. So if I could come to you now, what clinched it for you? You know, you had a very successful career, but you arrived big time here. You're heading Amazon Prime. You know, so if you could give us an insight of when is it a good time to come back? A lot of people today may not have a choice. They may not be able to go back simply because of the change in visa regulations, or you know, because of the pandemic and all of that. But when is it a good time to relocate to India?
See, I'll start with my story, right? In my case, I had been in the US for about 16 years, had a successful career in consulting. And my reason for coming back didn't start all the way in the beginning, like Heyman's story, right? Mine kind of evolved. During my 15 years in the US, I realized that, you know, the type of work that I was doing, the industries that I was consulting for were growing like very marginally, right? I was working with consumer product companies and retailers where, you know, the growth in US is very slow in those industries. And I really was, you know, looking forward to doing something transformational, right? Like building new business models. And around that time, you know, got in touch with a few of the startups here in India, as well as, you know, met the leadership team at Amazon. And I was really thrilled by the opportunity to create a subscription program in India, right? Like subscription was not a viable business model back in 2016. It's grown quite a bit, and I've been happy to be part of that growth. So my thing was like, hey, I want to do some transformational work, build something from scratch, and you know, not just for the employer that I am with, but for the ecosystem as a whole. So that was my story of moving back. In terms of your question on when is a good time to come back, I think it's a very personal thing, right? There are people who go with the intention of, hey, I'm going to go do a couple of years of grad school and come back. And there are people who you know, stay for longer. I would say that, you know, I looked at it. I'll tell you how I looked at it, right? I looked at it both from a personal and a professional angle, if you will, right? Professionally, I really wanted to do some really good work, right? So the opportunity, there's plenty of opportunity in India these days to do great work. So if you're able to find an opportunity, you should take it up, right? And these opportunities don't come very often. So just focusing and talking to the right people to look for these opportunities, I think is one. The second is like a lot of us coming back is also personal, right? I have 2 daughters. And when I think about my childhood, the favorite part of it was like spending time with my grandparents, right? And in spite of all the comfort that I could give my kids, I couldn't give them time with their grandparents. So it was a little bit of a personal thing. And so I found that timing to be right when, you know, my kids were younger and I wanted to come back. And lastly, I would say that, like, you know, I didn't think so hard to move to America, right? Like we picked up the bags one day and we left. But I feel like some of us think too much about coming back, right? Like this is our home country. So, you know, that was kind of my clinching moment, right? Like, hey, why am I thinking too hard about it when, you know, my family is there, there's great opportunities there.
Okay, so basically what I'm getting from Hemant and Subho is that there's, and it's kind of obvious, there will always be a personal story which will dictate to wanting to come back. Ashwini, let me come to you now. You know, unlike the other 2 panelists who are continuing to work for large American corporations, Amazon as well as Lightspeed, you decided to do totally differently. You wanted to be an entrepreneur. How was it for you to come back to India and then to be an entrepreneur here, where the work culture, the work ethics is just so different?
Yeah, definitely a bit of a different story there. And for me, the question that drove me was, what do I want to get done before dying? To kind of keep with that theme a little bit. You know, and our story of coming back, both my co-founder, who also happens to be my husband, and I, we'd been there for a very long time, and largely between academia and industry. And we woke up one morning in 2013, and we booked our tickets to India. We picked up our kids. We put the entire house on Craigslist. We sold pretty much everything out within 24 hours. The car, everything. And in about 1 week's time, we rented the house and, moved back to India. I do not encourage that. It was a nightmare for like a couple of years to kind of cope, but it was the only way at that time. That's largely the kind of people that Anand and I are. We think we want to do something, we just jump, and we did that. And no regrets, absolutely no regrets. And people called us all kinds of names and called us crazy for leaving SF to come to Chennai and start up an AI company here. And I think it's one of the best things we could have done. The deep tech talent in Madras is just unbelievable. It's broadly the same all over India, but obviously very fond of my hometown. To be able to come back and start a company here and work with all the talent that's largely been moving abroad, right? Like these are the people that go to the US to do their masters, to go to the US to do their PhD, or to get employed by, no digs at you, Mr. Boo, but by Amazon in the US. For us, it was a story of, hey, there's no need for that, right? You've got a computer vision and an AI company right here. And, this is broadly the kind of, opportunity that has not been around in the country for a very long time. And that is clearly...
that's such an interesting point. That's such an interesting point that you made, Ashwini, about just the vibrancy that you saw for yourself in Madras. But it's a wave that has caught on across India. Like, we want to be the Silicon Valley on this side of the world. So Hemant, let me come to you, because you also have always been making a case on Twitter. I know it's part of your job at Lightspeed to find new entrepreneurs, solving India-specific problems that can go global. But it is... we are a hotbed for startups. You've correctly pointed out very often that you now have more unicorns outside of the United States, and you reminded us all as well how cheap the cost of internet is over here. Just that the entrepreneurial spirit that has been unleashed in the country. So from a banker's perspective as well, you've been there, you've been here now. How difficult is it? Because the bankers also sometimes forget to adjust the forex and the inflation, all of that, and they make less here than they would in the US.
So we think of ourselves as co-builders, not bankers. I want to clarify that up front. But in terms of answering your question, Antar, I think look, the talent is, we are in the people's business. People is the core of our success, and what we get excited by most is people. And when people meet amazing markets, then magic happens, and that's where we want to put our money, right? So in terms of talent, I think India has always had some of the smartest, hardest working people that I've ever met personally. If you look at the startup ecosystem in the US as well, you would see maybe when I was at my previous fund, I used to see maybe 30 to 40% of deal flow with an Indian founder, and not Indian brought up in the US. They were Indian brought up in India, went to the US, spent about 10 years working in Amazons and Googles and the Bureau AI type companies and startups. And then they began their entrepreneurial journey, right? So I think we have gone through, so we are a less mature ecosystem, I would certainly say that, right? We haven't gone through all the ups and downs of the 80s and the 90s that the US went through. And as a result of that, what we have here is two things. One, we have founders that tend to get too excited too quickly, right? It's a good and a bad thing. And they tend to get too depressed too quickly when things are not going their way. And people have gone through these multiple cycles, experienced people like Ashwini here, they tend to be more stable, right? And these are the kind of people that end up building large companies because they don't get distracted too quickly. There is something to be said about excitement, but there's always some maturity that I think helps in building large companies. So that's number one. The second is, I think when I look at the talent pool at the top, right, the best of the best in India, they are no better or worse than what I see the best of the best in the US. If anything, I think the risk is so binary in India because when you failure has a risk attached to it, has a negative connotation attached to it in India, which is not there in the US, especially in Silicon Valley. So the risk founders are taking is much more binary. You have to win because losing is a much worse option here than anywhere else. So I find them very, very high on hunger, hustle, resourcefulness, intelligence, and knowledge about the market. What I think is missing in India is the middle layer. We don't have enough Eric Schmidts to Larry Pages of the world. We don't have enough Sheryl Sandbergs to the Mark Zuckerbergs in the world. And I think that's changing with time. When you have a Flipkart like exit, right? Or people with, people have spent their early careers in Byju's and Oyos and Ola's type companies. I've seen mega scale. Once they have spent 5-6 years and done their job, what would they do? They take a year off, go to the Himalayas and do yoga, and then come back. And what do? They start new companies, they invest in other companies, they become angel investors, advisors, and they become VPs or CXOs. And that's what I think is happening now, but needs to happen in much more momentum to really build the ecosystem in a more sustainable way.
Okay. That's very fantastic. Some very great points that you made here. We're much harder on ourselves here. We're not willing to accept failures, and neither have we seen the kind of bust cycles that Silicon Valley has. So, if I could come to you, you're heading Amazon Prime, all of that, but like I asked you initially, the work culture is so different here. I'm sure you deal with it, the flip-flop in the government policy, the lack of continuity in that sense, the federal structure, all of that comes into play. How is someone who's in the US relocating to India supposed to adjust to all of this? They're not used to it.
Yeah. So I think the fun of building is being able to deal with all these unknowns, ambiguous situations, right? Irrespective of whichever quarter it comes from, and being able to build something amid all this uncertainty and unknowns, I think is all the fun, right? Whether you're in a corporate environment like I am, or whether you're starting like Ashwini is. So I think any country you go to, right? Like even if you go to US or anywhere in Europe, there is a set of uncertainties that come with it, right? The type of uncertainties might be different, but the whole point of being an entrepreneur or leading a organization is being able to deal with all those uncertainties and still coming out with products and services that appeal to hundreds of millions of customers. I think that's the appeal in India, right? Like the ability to serve a billion customers in India and come up with something very unique is a huge opportunity. And I would encourage everyone to pursue it, not get bogged down by some of the, the noise that surrounds it.
Okay. Ashwini, as you don't get yourself busy with the noise and all of that, and you're trying to shatter glass ceilings. I hate that phrase, but it's used very often for women entrepreneurs or women who just succeed really well in the corporate world. I'm going to give you the final question over here. While relocating, when you come back here, is it actually a process where you have to also unlearn a lot? And how do you do that then as an entrepreneur? Your vision, your passion, you give up on your dream, you give up literally on your baby.
Yeah, I think, you do give up a lot, but to Subbu's point, you gain a lot as well. And I think for us, one of the things that moving back really taught us is that in India, you really have to give up a lot of control in order to gain control. I think that was our number one lesson, right? In the US, life is very, very structured, very mechanical, for a lack of a better way to put it. There are routines, there are habits, everything. You can expect a set of things and they will happen, right? It's not like that in India. You open the tap and you won't get water, and you turn the switch on and there is no electricity. And then the only thing that is actually a constant is data, right? You're always online and you're always working regardless of what's going on. So it's a bit of a, it's so glaring, right? The way life is over here. And for us, I think it was really about giving up some of that control, right? And being okay with going with the flow, learning as we go, and kind of jumping in and facing the uncertainties, right? And I think and to be honest with you, this was the case. I'm talking about, 7 years ago when we moved back, and it took us 2 years to just get our kids adjusted in the country, to adjust ourselves before we can actually start running the company. But I think things are very different now, right? Fast forward to 2020, and I think, you've got, like Hemant and Subbu were saying, you've got generations of entrepreneurs already out there. You've got funding, you've got the capital, you've got the people, you've got the talent, you've got people that have actually worked in many companies that know the drill, right? And for us, the goal and the ambition has always been to build from India for the world, right? And our products are global, which means, our teams are global. They're all over the world across different geographies. And I think the time for that is now. And as long as you can kind of be disciplined and know what to let go of and what to hold on to, and be willing to kind of do that dance between control and lack of control, I think you're in a good place.
Okay, that's a very important point, right? You can't micromanage everything. You have to give up a lot of control, and there will always be a lot of extraneous factors which you never accounted for. No place like home, as they say it. And with that, I'd like to thank all three of you for joining us here. These are three very successful participants from the startup ecosystem who have shown that relocating can be the right solution for you. You've got to figure all of that out. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned. We've got a lot lined up for you on the other side, including the latest for e-commerce companies, what the government wants, an exclusive interview with the global product head at Instagram, then a lot more coming up.